if you're struggling like with your phone usage at the moment, like there's like not like an official like there's no like you can't go to the doctor about it, you know? Like so and even if you could like at least in the UK, like the healthcare system and the kind of social safety net is under so much pressure that people that's like another thing that people that's used against people to like make them act in a certain way where it's like you need to be healthy mentally and physically because otherwise you're going to put strain on the NHS, you know. Like we have a lot, it's less
Do
common
people
than it used
actually
to be.
say that?
Yeah, when I was a kid, like it's less common now, but when I was a kid, you used to see like news articles about how like obesity was costing the NHS
Oh.
X million pounds a
Hmm.
day. And you see it a bit now, like the government's really taken against people on sick leave for mental health purposes. So we're seeing a lot of stories about how all these doctors are supposedly giving people sick notes to get out of work without having ever met them in person, you know, doing it over the phone or whatever. And it's like um, part of that thing of being like, oh, you need to be mentally healthy so you can go to work, so you can work full time. And you also need to be mentally healthy in a way that doesn't interfere with your ability to work full time. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to delve into that more, but I kind of want to go back a bit and establish a bit of background as to why you decided to do the research. So if
mm,
you can share a bit more, why did you decide to study Log of London?
yeah. So I actually had initially a different topic for my dissertation,
Uh-huh.
which got rejected by the ethics committee, but it was looking at doomsday preppers and people that were trying to like build a life without any technology or with very minimal technology. So when I kind of had that topic that had been rejected and was like, I need a new one, what should I do? I was trying to pull the themes that I was interested out and be like, how can I take a theme from that and put it towards something that won't freak out the UCL ethics committee. And so I was like, okay, I think like one of the things I'm interested in is like non-typical relationships to technology and also like technological ambivalence. So like I think and I was sort of seeing this in a lot of the wider like digital anthropology we're doing our course where it was like the assumption that the future was a done deal, you know, and that the future was going to be very technologically like saturated. So it was looking at like how are these like long-standing communities being changed by the introduction of technology or being created by technology. And I was like, well, I think it'd be interesting to look at people whose relationship to technology isn't so like cut and dry and it isn't so um like it isn't just like inherently assuming that the future is going to be people more online or people more like integrated with technology. And that's what interested me about the preppers because I was like their vision of the future is one where like they don't take for granted that like phones are going to exist, that the internet's going to exist.
Yeah.
um so I was kind of googling stuff around that and I found like some like I think I found like an American like digital rehab clinic, which I think actually a PhD student in UCL ended up doing his research on as well. Um, and then I found Log Off London is what I called it in the dissertation. I found that online and was like, okay, and I sent it to my supervisor and was like, and they were like, yeah, yeah, that's so. But I was interested as well, and I also was like, these look like quite good like anthropological events because there are these clubs and you meet up, and so I'm like, there's a very easy in for it. And then I emailed the main email for it, and this guy replied. I think in the dissertation I called him Charlie,
Yeah.
and he was so nice, and he was like immediately just like, yeah, you can do this. He gave me a code so I could go to all the events for free. Um, he was just very, very welcoming.
Was it framed as a business enterprise from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think like it's for profit. It was interesting because I think with Charlie, he was very much like, this is something I care about. Like he went to these events because he just spent like a whole year basically like working nonstop online and was just like sick of it, you know? And so he was like, I want this for myself. But I think in that very classic, like sort of tech industry thing was like, oh,
Yeah.
here's a really cool thing. And I'm
You
gonna like
seize the
I'm gonna,
opportunity.
yeah, I'm gonna monetize that, you know? Um, and then, but yeah, but so it was, yeah, it was really interesting where I was like, oh, it's from the same like economic ecosystem as like all these other things, like as TikTok, as you know, as like the whole is very much a product of the tech industry in the same way that phones are. Um, and it very much relied on like virality. So like almost everybody that came found out about it through TikTok or Instagram. Um, like I think I found out about it through Googling, which made me quite unusual. But you know, as far as I'm aware, there were no, it never placed any like on offline ads. You know, like
Mm.
there weren't like, but also it's like that's part of what I wrote about in the dissertation. Where I was like the digital infrastructure is like sort of eroded all these other infrastructures. Like people don't read, or especially younger people don't read like magazines in the same way. There aren't like there used to be in the lots of different cities in the UK like a magazine that was called The Skinny, and it was literally just you picked it up, it would just tell you what was on in all different places. And I'm
Ah,
like, you know, and I'm like, I never like I see you see like very local ones sometimes, but I'm like, yeah, that's where that sort of stuff would have been advertised maybe 20, 30 years ago, but that doesn't exist anymore, that magazine. So the only way you advertise things is online.
one of the things that I found after having talked to a few people about their relationship with their phones is how personal it actually is. Like when you ask people about their doom
Mhm.
scrolling habits, you're like, oh, this these are actually like very personal corner in your lives, you know?
Yeah. I think I talked about it a bit, but it's like, yeah, the language is very vague, sort of purposefully, where it's, but it also means and I had this a lot when I was talking to not just people, that my participants, to like my friends and stuff when I was doing my
Mm.
dissertation. And like I remember I was chatting to a friend who was like proofreading my diss for me, and they're not a very like online person at all. They're very offline, and they were telling me about how they spend way too much time on their phone and they find it really horrible and really draining. And they were talking about being on their phone for 2 hours a day. And I was like, that to me would be like an incredible day of offline productivity if I was only on my phone for 2 hours. But I'm like, we use the same language to describe like both things, and it kind of it hides, but it also makes it harder in a way to admit. Like if your screen time is 10 hours a day, like, and somebody else is talking about how their screen time's out of control at 2 hours, how are you meant to speak up and say, oh, mine's this, if like someone's already set like the standards quite low? Um, and I think that creates like a bit of anxiety and a bit of shame as well, because
Yeah.
everyone is like, no one's quite sure if people are like on their level, or, and also I guess some people might feel like, oh, because some people will say, oh, I have a massive screen time problem, but they don't really, they're just saying it, you know, and then
Or
it gets all
maybe,
very
I don't know, maybe because there isn't a standard as to what is actually a problem, like how much screen
Mhm.
time is too much. There isn't a consensus on that. So people are just like gauging based on, I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
only like the person's closest to them. They don't,
Mm.
I think this actually links back quite well to the opening of your dissertation when you had that quiz of like who
Yeah, the
has the most
giveaway
screen
thing.
time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Can you share more about that?
Yeah, that was this world record attempt. So there was like a company that sells these homemade pottery kits, and they were doing a giveaway. And to win it, you had to film. You had to get your phone out and show your screen time on film. And they were like writing it on a chalkboard, and whoever had the most would win the set. And I was like standing there with one of the other volunteers from Log Off, and we were like just like looking at the time, being like kind of relieved, because we both sort of wanted to enter because we wanted that pottery kit. But I think by the like fifth person, our time was already like wouldn't have won. Yeah, but that was really interesting because yeah, there were people there that's screen time was like um 12 hours or like 13 hours and stuff like that.
What was the
Um,
highest? Who won that day?
I think the highest was 13 and a bit. So like almost like half a day.
I really like the argument that you have in your dissertation, and you worded out so nice. I note down like the whole sentence that you wrote down. I think it's the part where you're saying um how harm and I can't recall it on the top of my head, but
Yeah.
basically harm and goodness, they coexist in the same environment and it's so hard to
Mhm.
separate the two. Can you maybe
Yeah.
explore more about that?
Yeah, funny story about that is I wrote that like sentence, and was just a random sentence in the first draft of my dissertation, and then Tone, my supervisor, was like, um, they were like, you know, that's the whole argument of your dissertation, right? You've just like summed it up incredibly well in this random paragraph. So maybe circle back on that, which is why I think it shows up a lot more of other places. But I was like, it was a very funny sort of the quirk of the writing process where you're like, oh yeah, I've just accidentally kind of summed it all up and not even noticed.
So
Um,
you weren't aware that was like your
it
thesis.
was yeah, it was what I was trying to get at, but I
Yeah.
like was like I almost like didn't notice that I'd said it already. I was like really like I was like, oh, I've written it, but I've not come to a point. Like I don't have a point. What's my point? And Tom was like, you've written the point. The point's there. And they had to point it out to me. Um, but yeah, I think it was just that like constant like what I was noticing in interviews and in people's like behavior and stuff was I was like, there's just this constant contradiction and these constant things where it's like, oh, like for every good thing you get from going off your phone, you are also giving up something, and some of that stuff just like non-negotiable. So then that's how people get stuck back in. So like at the end of the events, when everyone's getting their phone back, um, everyone just goes straight back on it, and you're like, oh, and I was noticing it myself, where I was like, oh, like I've just been off my phone for like 3 or 4 hours. I've been reading, I've been doing all this stuff, and then I'm on the bus home, and I'm like, I'm just on my phone again. Like, and it felt almost like completely undoing it. But I was like, well, I needed to get my phone out because I was getting numbers for people so I could contact them about interviewing, and then I had to look up the nearest bus stop or the bus time, or like see if it was worth getting the train. Then I had to like use it to get into the public transport system and things. And then I was like putting music on or whatever. And I was like, oh, like there's like all these essential things that I need my phone for. And because I can't not do them literally to get home, I like, I'm just then getting sucked back into all the stuff that I don't like about my phone. And, I think like a lot of people had tried different strategies to just have the phone for the essential thing, but what you saw was it didn't really work. So
Yeah, yeah. Did that become a fact that is discouraging for any of the people that you interview? Were they aware of that tendency? Were they just grab their phone the second the event was over?
yeah, I think a lot of people like noticed it in themselves and found it quite frustrating. And I think because in the dissertation I talk about all the other strategies that people tried to like keep off their phones, like downloading certain apps or having timers and things. And for a lot of them, they were like very found it quite frustrating because they were like, well, I've got this strategy, but it just doesn't work or it only works like half the time. Like a friend of mine would had like set his charging up so his phone was like on the other side of the room. So he couldn't go on it in bed if he wanted to charge it, but he was like, I just take a portable charger and it just like sleeps in bed with me. And I think he was like quite frustrated where he was like, well, I've got this strategy, but it doesn't work because I just like if you're like half asleep or if you're doing something on your phone as you're going to bed and you don't want to stop, you just are like, oh, fine, I'll just do it for a little bit. And I think that was the other thing where it's like people were like find it really all or nothing, where it would be like, I can't say I'll just go on for 5 minutes, I'll just go on for 10 minutes. It'd be like, no, I would say that, but I'll be on for an hour, I'll be on for 2 hours.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And it does bring back to the point where going offline feels like a privilege.
mhm.
So you have to it's a space that is like consciously constructed and you have to be very mindful to have to defend it, right?
Yeah, because that's what I was noticing a lot when I was talking to people. So I was like, people are really aware of that. Like they can see it and they can feel it in themselves where, they're doing that like neoliberal citizenship. They're like striving to do the right thing for themselves. They're making all the choices that are the good choices and they're being productive and they're prioritizing their well-being in a way that makes them like healthy, in a way that makes them productive, conscientious citizens or whatever. But they're like doing that and they're aware that they're doing it in this world, like in this like tech world that's completely set up against that. And they're aware that no one's helping them with it, where it's like, oh, like they're like, these apps are designed to be really addictive. Our phones are designed to be really addictive. And everybody knows that. And nobody is doing anything to stop it.
Esther, if you weren't researching about this, would you have joined the meetups and like be engaged in the community?
I think I wouldn't have, but that's just because the like structure of it was something I wasn't very used to. So I'd never done any like social clubs in that way before. And then when I actually went to them, I was like, this, I actually did really enjoy them. Especially we'd have like specific reading ones where we'd go to like bookshop cafes. And I was like, actually having like a day in the like a day where you've got 2.5 hours to do nothing except read and then talk about books was really, really nice. But I think like I wouldn't have joined under my own steam. Um, but that's not because I don't have a screen time problem. It's just because I would have like not paid. I wouldn't have wanted to pay £12 to go to like a event on the other side of London and do that. I would have been too proud for that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I actually know about the community because their events, either I found them on Eventbrite because I was looking for networking opportunities, or like from Instagram, and just seeing the entry price, the ticket price for these stuff. I'm like, if I want to go to a coffee shop and have a day where I read, I'm just gonna do that and just pay for my
yeah,
coffee as opposed to having to pay for an entry ticket. So it's quite interesting
mhm,
knowing like, oh, it actually attracts quite a number of people.
yeah. And I think like if I was writing a longer dissertation, it would have been a whole chapter on like social clubs as a thing,
Mm,
which I found the whole thing very like alien to me. That was almost the most unusual thing, and I was like, it's got absolutely nothing to do with digital anthropology, so it's
yeah.
not it's not getting a look in. But like, there's like a whole ecosystem of like clubs, that people pay to go to, and it might be and a lot of people that I interviewed, like going to the log off clubs were like the same part of that same like practice, like set of practices where they were like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm making good choices, and part of that is going and doing social events where I socialize with people. But it was what I found interesting was I was like, people come to these clubs and they pay, and they might come to multiples and have people that they see, but they don't tend to like see those people outside of the club. Because to me, that
Mm,
would be the point of these things. Where like, well, you go, you make a couple of friends, and then when you've made the friends, you don't need to go to the club anymore and pay. You've
yeah.
got friends now, and you can just do that stuff.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it was like, no, like this is what they do. They pay money to go to like a restaurant and eat with people they've not met before, or they go to not have their phones and do like coloring and chatting and stuff, or they go on
Yeah.
walks, and it's like, yeah, there was like a whole economy of like people paying to socialize, which I think maybe I'm just quite lucky in that I've always had like a large friendship group, and I came up with like going to like a youth club that I'm still quite involved in. So I was like, oh, I think a lot of what for me gets fulfilled by that, and my friendship network's very based on that. People that don't have that, they're kind of like trying to recreate it in their adulthood. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But is there any like sort of overlap between these clubs and the clubs that you enter because they're exclusive, So you get a sense of value from being associated with these places.
I think so. And I think you get a sense of like social capital, I guess, of being like, oh, I'm going to like hang out. I'm doing something that's a bit challenging. I'm hanging out with other people that want to be challenging in that same way, like whether that's by being like not on your phone and having
Yeah.
like a digital detox, or whether it's by like going on a hike with some people that you don't know very well. Like I think there's an element where it's like that's seen as being like proactive and being like outgoing in a way that seems like positive, because it's like, oh, like I talk to strangers, I like involve myself in like a community. They just felt it was worth it. And I guess like for a lot of people specifically, like not being allowed to be on your phone and having that social pressure to be off your phone was really valuable and was worth it. And I guess
Yeah.
that's part of what I got into my disc, where I was like, you know the structure of the club is a bit like over the top and silly in a way, but you're like, a lot of people were very much like, I cannot do this without it. Like I can't do this. I can't do it when I'm on my own. I can't do it at my house, like or if it's just me and my friends, like we don't do this. We need that external pressure. We need that external structure
Hmm.
to like keep the phones away. So for them, it was worth like the price. It was worth traveling because they needed like that external support.
Yeah. How challenging was it for them to be away from their phone for a few hours?
I think what was interesting was when you're actually at the clubs, it wasn't particularly challenging because
Mhm.
you're having fun and you're talking with people. And so I think most people would like get to the end of the event and would be like, oh, like this is great. It wasn't hard. Because the events themselves were quite like exceptional and they were like very removed from the everyday structure of life. So I think then what you'd see is people coming here and having it where it was fun and it was easy, and then trying to do it themselves at home or just like in their day-to-day lives and like not being able to do it in the same way because it's like, oh, you don't when you're not in like a nice event space where there's a person playing piano in the back, like a like actual live musician playing the piano in the background, and you're not with loads of other people who are all talking to you, then it's like that creates like a really like easy environment where it's really easy to forget about your phone. But
Yeah.
you can't when you're just at your house or when you're in bed or when you just are like on the tube, like making those choices to not be on your phone is much, much harder.
Yeah, but that also points to the question of what are these events for? Are they trying to equip people to have the skills to be away from their phone or to have like better self-regulation, or is it to just create the space for them to be offline for a few hours? I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
like, were there any kind of workshops that you guys do? Oh, these are the ways you could have a better relationship with your phones.
Yeah. I mean, we'd often have these kind of like discussions at the like especially at the slightly smaller events where we'd, the structure of the event was you'd come in, you'd chat for a bit, and then you'd have your like kind of time to focus on yourself, which would be like an hour or so where you didn't talk to other people. There was music playing, you read or you colored in or you did a word search, like whatever it is you wanted to do. And then we'd come back and talk. And often Charlie or the other volunteers would try and structure that talk when we came back, at least initially, to be a bit more about like different strategies and about how people felt and stuff.
Yeah.
So there was like that element of, oh, what do you do that works? What do other people do that works? That was definitely trying. But I think ultimately, like, even though I think everyone who was very involved with the club was it was something that they cared about and it's something they thought was important. I mean, I think ultimately the club existed to make a profit, so it was more focused on making events that people wanted to come back to than it was necessarily about um getting long lasting change and things.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of what my dissertation was about as well, was like lots of people who were like, I have a real problem with myself. I have a real problem with how the world works, but I don't think it's possible to change those things. So I'm just going to focus on like these sort of very like singular events um, where I can just not like where I can not worry about that for a bit, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of curious to understand your idea of digital well-being now that you've done the research. Do you walk away having a renewed sense of what it means to be digitally well?
I think like I have slightly gotten better with my habits since the dissertation because when I was writing it, I like I was getting so distracted by my phone and my computer. I actually like, hand wrote the first draft of my dissertation because
Wow.
if I sat at my computer, I just didn't do anything. So I just like got a notebook and ended up writing like pretty much the whole first draft by hand, which was very sore and very like
But that's amazing
um
though.
yeah, which I think was actually quite useful in a way, and interesting. And then yeah, I like typed it all up and sent it to Tone, and it was made no sense, but it was like what had to be done. But I think because I needed to like be really harsh on myself, I started just leaving. Like I had to just physically like leave my phone places. Like I was at my grand's house, and I'd leave it somewhere random, and she'd like bring it to me. She'd be like, "Oh, you left your phone somewhere." I'd be like, "No, it needs to stay there. Like take it away from me. Don't give it back to me." Um, and then like I think I also so not necessarily purposefully, but I've recently like gotten rid of all the apps on my phone, not for screen time reasons, but because of adverts. So I use the Firesoft browser app and I have ad block installed on that. And I was like, oh, I can go on YouTube and Instagram and other social media sites and I don't get any ads if I do it that way. So now they're all a bit like I'm on the browser version of a lot of things, which helps a bit. And then I recently installed like um an extension that like gets rid of Instagram Reels and stories. So I don't really go on Instagram at the moment. Um, and then I download TikTok like 1 day a month. Give myself like 1 day of TikTok a month. But I think my takeaway has been like, because I was like, I do get a lot of enjoyment from going on the internet. Like I grew up very online and I'm like, I've got like, there's a culture there. I've got like um people and like communities that I find really valuable. So I don't want to cut it out completely. Um, but it's just about like trying to trying to like only engage with the stuff that I enjoy and trying to find and like kind of I guess just being aware where I'm like if I have the TikTok app on my phone, I will go on it so that I just don't have the app on my phone type stuff. Um,
Yeah. Did all of these measures come after you did your dissertation, or were you already experimenting with ways to cut off your screen time before that?
so I'd like was experimenting with like I had timers and things on my phone. I had it set to like go black and white at a certain point in the night and stuff. On my old phone, the notifications used to like automatically turn themselves off at a certain point, which was quite good. Um, so I was experimenting a bit and like none of that stuff was really working. And the stuff I do now, it like kind of like it works most of the time, but it's the sort of thing where I'm like, it kind of works as long as I'm not thinking about stuff too much. Like if I think, oh, maybe I want to download TikTok and then I go download it, I'm like, I have to just accept that that's like my day gone because
Mm.
I will just use TikTok for like most of the day. So it has to be like very much like a, is this really how I want to spend my day today? Like, is there anything else I'd rather be doing? And if there is, let's try do that first at least. Yeah, my vision of the future would be one where people were a bit less harsh on themselves, but it would also be one where there was like a there was like a real effort to like rebuild the offline world that people feel like they've lost because I'm like that world was not built like spontaneously and it wasn't built like by accident. Like, we people I think people don't necessarily realize, but it's like I'm like they're used like governments. This sounds I'm romanticizing the past. I'm trying not to, but I'm like we used to have a like political system in the UK that like gave thought to art and to leisure and to pleasure in the same way and like viewed those things as like public goods that needed public funding. And I'm like, I think to me, like rather than like social media bans and things, I'm like we should be like focusing on that, on rebuilding our like infrastructure of leisure, which requires government things like I go like I was saying to you earlier, like I go swimming into the sauna. I'm like, this place that I go is like a pool that the council built, like the Manchester City Council built in like the 80s or 90s. It's now run by like a private company that runs all these pools all over like Manchester. It just took them over for the council. But I'm like, I'm still lucky in that it exists and it's being run and it's like relatively affordable. Like where I was living in London, like the public pool closed down during COVID and never reopened. And like and I'm like, so now I'm like if you want to go swimming in that area of London, your nearest pool is like a 40-minute drive away or like a 40-minute bus journey away. Or like you have to get the train into London and then back out in a different direction. So I'm like, to me, those are the things that will help because I think when you look at the clubs I was going to, I was like, because there's so much time and effort put into making these enjoyable,
Yeah.
that is what makes it possible for people to like get off their phones.
Yeah, yeah. I like that phrase, infrastructure of rest and leisure.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of wondering, like, must the answer always be in the form of infrastructure? Do we need government to build stuff? Can it be something that doesn't require infrastructuring?
I think it can and it can't in that I'm like, you know, like when I go to like the pub with my friends or whatever, I'm like, we tend to be pretty like offline naturally. And like, a lot of us make the conscious effort or like the conscious choice to leave our phone in our bag and we can have that. And like if I'm with people, like that's another thing I do now is I consciously leave my phone somewhere else so that I can't just go on it. Or if I'm gonna go on it, I have to like physically go and make that choice.
Mhm.
Um, but I think like, and I'm like, that's good, but I'm like, that's in a pub, that's that's the infrastructure part is like
Mm.
having a place that I can go to. Um, and I think for, and I think especially when you start thinking about if you don't want to drink, especially in the UK, because obviously we're a very alcohol sort of heavy culture, but like, like that was like one of the other things with like the Log Off London events was I was like, a lot of the places there they do sell alcohol, but the part it's not really like a drinking thing. So like lots of people wouldn't drink or would maybe have one drink and stuff. But I was like, actually, for having somewhere in London that you can sort of drink non-alcoholically past about 7 p.m. is quite tricky. Um, so that's like another nice quirk of those events was having like cafes that would be technically closed, but because we were there, there would be someone there who could make coffee or make tea. Um, but like I think like the infrastructure stuff to me, it's just about well, we just need those places, and
Yeah.
as men, we need places that are free or places that are cheap. Um, and are like have a variety. And I'm like that stuff I think needs to be like I view it as infrastructure because I'm like, well, it should be publicly funded. It should be something that we all pay for through our taxes, like through our citizenship, that we then all get to reap the rewards from. That's what I think we need to accept is that like these things that like leisure, pleasure, like fun is as much a like human right and as much a like public necessity as like trains or roads or the police or whoever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But um, I mean, we come from the same program and the same school of thinking. But if people were listening to this and they're like, "Oh, must it always be the state? Is the state the solution for everything?" Like, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. I guess I'm biased in that I like would always prefer because to me like and this is maybe like naivete and privilege from growing up in like the imperial core of the first world, whatever. But I'm like, I would always much rather have like those kinds of interests be like somewhat linked to like the public in a way that they aren't when they're private. It's like, and like I think we've seen that with tech companies where you're like, it's not in the interests of tech companies to build like healthy digital infrastructure. It's in their interest to build addictive infrastructure because that's what's profitable for them. Whereas when you are not necessarily when you've got like and at the moment governments are very focused on profit and are very focused on like not spending money on deficits and all of that stuff but like, if you have like a political system where profit and that kind of thing is not um doesn't need to be at the forefront and it's like seen as okay for some things to lose money or not make money, then to me that relieves some of that pressure that's on and that will impact the design of things and that will impact um the way that things are like marketed or the way that things are created. And I guess as well, like in an ideal world, at least in the UK, like we technically a democratic system. And it's like, well, having these things that are then also tied to like people's democratic rights, and that gives people a say in a way that we don't have with, say, like Facebook, and especially with like a lot of these corporations, you're like they're American.
Yeah.
So we have even less of a say. Like I think if we had like British digital infrastructure that wasn't tied to profit but was tied to like the national interests of British people or of the British public, to me that would be more positive than having an American like corporation whose interests are like really untied to like us as like a community and us as a country. And it means that the decisions they make are going to be like different from the ones we need, you know? And it also means that like if you think about like them and the Charlie who did the log off events talked about this a lot as well, where he was like, you know, the only way that like social media companies are going to get less addicted is if they're legislated, and that we don't have the legislative power to do that in the UK because
Mm.
they're not UK companies. So we can like make legislation that try to like as the services come in from outside, we can try and shape them as they come in. But ultimately, like that legislation, like needs to come from America because that's where these companies are from. But there's not a political will to do that in America at the moment, which means our like country's like well-being and our own personal lives are being like really impacted by the like democratic choices that are going on in America that we don't have a say in.
Okay, I'll let you go. and let you
But it was good
enjoy
to
the
chat.
rest of your weekend. Yeah, it's so nice to chat. And we'll have more of these.
Yes, let's
Yes.
do it. But yeah,
Cool. Take care.
talk soon.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.